Hello and welcome to Music of the Two Rivers. I'm your host, Savannah. I am from Charleston, South Carolina, the hometown of Robert Jordan, author of The Wheel of Time, which has recently been adapted into a TV show on Amazon Prime. I've been a fan of the books for several years, and although I've known about it my whole life, I didn't actually get to reading it until I was in college, and my best friend was like, hey, you should pick up this book series, and now I've fallen down that rabbit hole. You've fallen down that rabbit hole too, and that's why you're here with me, so let's get to it. So today we're going to be talking about the first episode. This review is going to be a little bit different than what you're probably used to. We're just going to be talking about the music. So let's get right down to business. We're going to start with the two biggest negatives for me first. As a musician, one of my favorite characters in the books is Tom Merlin because he is a musician and I like seeing musicians in text. I love The Name of the Wind for that very reason. And he's not here! The lack of Tom in this first episode is very palpable because he brings such mirth and levity into those first few scenes with him, and he just opens up the world a little bit more in the book. I understand why he is not introduced in this first episode in the show. I mean, there wouldn't be enough time to cram him into that, hour-long segment, but at the same time, it makes the world seem that much more dry and that much smaller, and it's that much harder to get into for me. My second little gripe actually has to do with what I would argue is the most musical non-musician character in the books, Matron Coffin. This is a minor spoiler for the books, but eventually Matt kind of gets his own theme song at Jack of the Shadows, and throughout the books he is a very artistic, very musical person, and we see that in his relationships with other characters and in his own appreciation for arts and music. Every single time that we've had a Matt character moment, at least in this first episode, there's no music. The music just cuts out as soon as Matt starts talking, Matt starts doing, and I don't know why. Every single other character gets at least one moment of character music. Matt gets nothing. Even in that heavy, intense moment in the middle of the Trolloc battle when he's rescuing his sisters, the music cuts out. Maybe it's so that when certain things happen to Matt in the future and his arc develops in a certain way, we get a huge change that we subconsciously notice in that he gets all this music. But honestly, I don't understand why Matt's moments are silent. I do think it's a good sign that my two biggest gripes are about what isn't there rather than about what is there, We get two major motifs in this first episode. The first one is what I think is Moraine's theme. It's a 3-note motif, do, mi, fa. It comes back time and time again, and at the very end of the episode, it actually resolves. Instead of going to that perfect fourth, it actually ends up in a perfect fifth. Do, fa, so. And I think that is meant to signify that Moraine has completed this first leg of her journey, that it is not the beginning, but it is a beginning, if you know what I mean. The second motif that's introduced is also in the key of C. And I like to call this the chase theme because it is introduced when we see this unnamed male channeler being, pretty much gunned down by the Aes Sedai. And we see it return just about a minute later when Moraine says, nah, it's not him. We gotta go to the Two Rivers. Come on, let's go. And it subtly returns like, ooh, here we go. She's chasing after the dragon. The theme doesn't come back for a while, and then suddenly we have the Battle of the Trollocs and everything, and then the tide turns as Days Conger is like, you want a piece of me? Come at me, bro. And this theme comes back, this time with the electric guitar. It is a flawless moment of orchestration because it is something new, it is something different, it is something unexpected, just like this middle-aged woman with a pitchfork going after this 9-foot-tall monster. The final return of this motif is at the very end of the episode again, when Moraine tells the four, okay, we gotta go. Come on, let's book it. And when it finally returns, it's actually one of my favorite moments in the episode, musically speaking, but we'll get to that in a minute. The chase motif and Moraine's motif kind of blend together in this very last leg of the episode into this amalgam that really sets the stage for what's to come. Absolutely everything in this episode is in the key of C minor. Maybe that is just Lauren being lazy. Maybe it was intentional. After all, in the book, The Rules of Composition by Marc-Antoine, whatever the heck his name is, he describes the key of C as gay and warlike, which frankly describes this episode to a T. Overall, the music really complements what's happening on the screen so much. This is especially apparent in the moments where we have natural things happening, like the rolling rivers, the apparent calm on the surface, and then the rocky undercurrents underneath that chaos. Even when we get that flash of thunder matched with the folksy music of the two rivers, it just blends together so well. In the lantern scene, it's voices. And it reminds me so much of the works of Eric Whitacre. If you don't know who he is, please go check him out. Something that Eric Whitacre does a lot is he uses the beautiful timbre of human voices to take advantage of harmonies that aren't frequently used. In other words, dissonance. Mostly composers rely on consonants for harmonies, but Eric Whitacre can somehow have every single note in the chromatic scale being played all together at once and make it sound beautiful. And this lantern scene, it reminds me of that so much because every single resolution resolves into dissonance. This kind of eerie feeling, this ghost-like feeling that really complements the idea of reaching out to the dead. All in all, the music is very understated. There are only a couple of moments that are quite heavy-handed. There are several moments in the show so far where the music just completely dips out and lets whatever is happening on screen happen without any musical accompaniment. And it creates a moment that's that much more... I don't know what the word is. I'm a musician, not a wordsmith. Anyways, the most significant of these moments I'm talking about are at the beginning when we have that avalanche of rocks. The music is swelling, it's and we feel it getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then this avalanche of rocks comes down, and any other composer would have probably put a big clash there as the rocks come tumbling down, but instead Lauren just drops out and we just see the rocks falling, and it's not loud, it's not this thundering sound, but it's devastating anyways, because we know, oh, he's not gonna get away. Here at the beginning of this episode, you don't know if these are the good guys or the bad guys or who's on which side here. It's a very interesting moment to go, oh, he's not gonna make it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? The music doesn't tell us. The next instance that I can think of this is the accidental killing of Layla, Perrin's wife. We have these electric guitars, we got this percussion, we got all this stuff going on as Perrin is absolutely going berserk on this poor Trolloc, and then he turns and he kills his wife, and the music just drops out. And all we hear are her breaths and his breaths. And it's this utterly human moment. It's just death. And it's so raw and palatable. It's honestly eerie and hard to watch in a good way. There is one moment where the music cuts out where it is an edited effect. It is not a natural, okay, we're going to stop playing at this particular moment to create a character moment. And it doesn't work for me. After Lan sees the slaughtered animals in the shape of the dragon's fang, it's all creepy and mysterious and stuff, and the music swells, and then it stops and we get Moraine staring out a window. And because it, to me at least, it sounds like that effect of dropping out suddenly was added in post, it immediately drew me out of the action. Every time I watch it, that bit draws me out, so I don't really pay attention to what's going on next, because I'm just like, what? Instead of going, oh my god, what just happened? I go, what? What just happened? And that's not a good thing. You may have liked that moment. It just wasn't for me. So let's talk about the One Power. Now, I have been thinking, as I'm sure a lot of book fans have, about how the One Power was going to be shown on the screen. I was so worried that it was going to be, super gaudy or super boring. And, I have thoughts on the depiction of the One Power on the screen. I wish it was more colorful, for example, but that's not what we're talking about here. When we get introduced to the One Power, like properly, not in that first chase scene, because we don't really see what's happening there, and we cut to Moraine too quickly. We get introduced to the One Power in this bath scene with Lan being a whiny child and complaining that the water is too cold, and Moraine just being like, all right, I got your message, and heating up the water. And we're introduced to it as this sparkly little chime thing, and it's this lovely, very quaint, very mysterious, almost ethereal sound. It's familiar, but it's not common. And I feel like that is the perfect introduction to the One Power. Later in the episode, Moraine is summoning all the One Power that she can without, keeling over and dying as she's trying to defeat this Trolloc army with one last final blow. We have the chimes come back. And those little tinkling chimes are accompanied by more instruments as she's drawing in more and more of the power. But we know, ooh, this is the moment. The way that the One Power is depicted, aside from the chimes, is very different from all of the rest of the music. There's a lot of bends in the pitch, where it almost sounds like something that doesn't belong. It fits so well with the way I imagine the One Power in my head that it doesn't matter what the effects are on the screen for me, because if I'm closing my eyes and just listening to the action, I know the minute the One Power is being used, because the music tells you this is something dazzling, this is something exciting, it is something terrifying, it is something awesome in every sense of the word. Now let's talk about something I did not like. When the Trollocs attack, we get this percussion line that immediately took me out of the action because it felt like Skyrim. It draws me out of the action every single time I watch this scene because I can't help but hear the dragon attacking Whiterun. The music quickly changes to something that is so much better. We get the moment with Tam and Rand defending themselves, defending their home from the Trolloc, and the music in that scene is completely different, and it is just so much better. In the previous scenes with the Trollocs attacking, the music was very video gamey in that it was loud, it was almost overtaking the action on the screen, except when Matt went behind a closed door and the music was muffled because the battle's out there. And it didn't really complement what was happening on the screen. When we get to this moment with Rand and Tam, the instrumentation is so much more well thought out. Each little incremental thing that happens on the screen is reflected in the music. When Tam pulls out the heron-marked blade, we suddenly get this slight change in instrumentation, slight change in harmony that shows, oh, the tides have turned. Rand kills the Trolloc by delivering that final blow. The percussion suddenly cuts out, but the other instruments remain. And we get that sense of adrenaline that's still pumping, even though the danger is gone. It is such a great moment, musically speaking, and I don't know why that same attention wasn't given to the earlier moments in the Trolloc attack. I will say the instrumentation is something I have seen a lot of people complaining about. Namely, a lot of people are complaining that this isn't a purely orchestral soundtrack. Now, as you can see, I am a violinist. I love classical music. I own a little bust of Beethoven that watches me when I sleep. But I think, as a classical musician, that the choice of instrumentation and genre works. A lot of people argue that you have to have the sounds of a symphonic orchestra to emulate the sound of fantasy, and that is such crap. It is a mistake to assign one genre, one type of instrumentation to any genre out there. This happened with sci-fi, with 2001: A Space Odyssey, with Star Wars, with Star Trek, with all that stuff. You get the same exact sounds. It's Holst the Planets over and over and over and over again, and I hate it. I love Holst the Planets. I've played it before. It's a lovely set of pieces, and it is so fun to listen to, and it's so fun to play. But not every single sci-fi thing needs to follow that exact same script. It's boring. As soon as you hear something that sounds vaguely like Mars or Jupiter or Venus, you're like, oh yeah, this is sci-fi, yep. And that's not a good thing. With Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, two of the most similar comparisons that I can think of to the Wheel of Time, we have this very specific kind of orchestral sound. And it's got this, theme of adventure and looking up and these certain keys and these certain instruments, and it's just so standard. I did not want to see the Wheel of Time fall into that same trap, and I am so glad it didn't. Most fantasy shows and movies and even musicals, operas out there fall into this trapping. Whether they're lighthearted or serious, they have the same sound to them. But the Wheel of Time is different. It is establishing itself as something different. Wheel of Time has inspirations here that range from what sounds like Eric Whitacre to what sounds like punk rock, and frankly, that is perfect. Last time I checked, the Two Rivers didn't have a resident string quartet. Camelin didn't have a resident symphonic orchestra. So what is it that makes people think that you have to have a symphony to describe the world of fantasy through music? I've seen people complain that the electric guitar is a modern instrument, so it doesn't fit in the Wheel of Time. Well, guess what? The violin was not standardized until Stradivarius came along just a couple of hundred years ago. And the technological state of the Wheel of Time is similar to what we had more like 1,000 years ago. So the violin is also too modern for this show if we're getting down to brass tacks. If you're just talking about the advent of electricity, guess what? Modern violins would not exist the way that they do if it were not for a modern technology. We would still be using gut strings. We wouldn't have bows that look and feel and act the way they do. I'm getting really riled up about this because it's the critique that bothers me the most, because it's such an uneducated, uninformed opinion to say that the electric guitar is too modern for the Wheel of Time. Number one, the Wheel of Time is a wheel. It goes around in a frickin' circle. So if they eventually have electricity, they have had electricity before. So shut up. It's happened in the past. It's... Did you miss what the Wheel of Time is? I'm calm. It's all good. Anyways, the Wheel of Time is breaking out of the regular fantasy mold through its music, and it's doing so in a way that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit more about the actual instrumentation. It ranges from a cappella voices to, the standard Western instruments to what sounds like maybe some Eastern instruments thrown in there. And then, of course, we have the electric guitars. It is all over the place, but it is not completely scattered out the wazoo to where there's no uniformity. There is a unifying thread here in that, number one, the musical motifs reoccur in ways that make sense, and number two, the music blends together perfectly. None of the music feels out of place. Again, except for the Skyrim bit. In each instance where the instrumentation changes, it's very carefully chosen. Why isn't my camera focusing? Based on what needs to happen for the mood of the piece at that moment. My favorite example of instrumentation I actually mentioned earlier at the very end of the episode when we have the final return of that chase theme. Previously, it was played by violins, electric guitar, very treble, very sharp instruments. But here at the end, it's played by the bass section of the orchestra. It sounds like maybe the cellos, maybe some violas, maybe the basses. And it is doubled by, I think, an acoustic guitar. And so we have that warmth of the lower section of the strings, plus that sharp twang of the guitar, and it creates this sound that is completely different than anything else we've heard the whole episode, and frankly, anything else I've heard ever in music. It's not frequent that I come across a new little instrumentation that makes me go, oh, hello there. But this is one of those moments. There are two distinct character moments I want to point out. The first is the introduction of the fade, the merge-roll, where the Amazon-provided subtitles say distorted whistling. This very creepy, very eerie sound that makes us go, oh, that's evil. Yes, that is indeed evil. And then it immediately cuts to Padan Fain. And I absolutely love that in this moment, Padan Fain is the one doing the whistling. Brilliant. Now, I know that it's a very heavy-handed, this guy is evil moment, but it works. So the second character moment that I want to talk about is when Moraine and Lan are fighting against the Trollocs. Their actions and their relationship is directly reflected in the music through what sounds like an electric bass and electric guitar. Both have their own thing going on. You know, the bass is playing a very distinct bass line and the guitar is doing this little riff up there. But it is clear that this is a duet, but the bass, first and foremost, is supporting the guitar. And that is exactly what's happening here. Lan is, first and foremost, protecting Moraine. Yeah, he's killing Trollocs, but it's in the name of protecting Moraine, so that she may fight. So I'm going to close with my overall impression of the music in this episode. We didn't get Tom. We didn't get any sung songs. We didn't get a theme song for the show in the pilot, which is weird. What we did get, 90% of it was phenomenal. There were a few moments that drew me out of the action, and there were a few things that didn't quite mesh, but the show is just starting. It is finding its footing, and I think the way that this has begun is pretty darn excellent. There you have it. If you managed to last this long in the video, bravo. Thank you. If you want to see more of this content, please like and subscribe. If you don't, then too bad. I have already produced 2 videos, arrangements of the 2 songs that we've already seen in the show. You can find them right here and right here. I hope to see you guys next time with my review of episode 2's music, which should be fun. All right. Bye-bye, y'all.